One thing that I always try to drive home to my students is this is like a permanent material. You can smash it with a hammer into 1,000 pieces. Somebody could theoretically still come back and carefully glue it back together. It exists to remain, whether intentionally or not. This fragile material that could shatter if you drop it on the floor, nonetheless holds up totally fine, buried in dirt for 2,000 years. On an artistic level, it's very striking to realize, hey, whatever I make, this is here to stay. My name is Gina Tibbott, and I'm a Brooklyn-based artist and educator focusing on ceramics and archaeology. I love the study of ancient ceramic technology and the archaeological study of ceramics and the history of archaeology as a practice. When I was in high school, I was lucky enough to have an amazing pottery teacher. Even though I was not totally devoted to ceramics at that point, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But then when I got to college, I was just interested in so much stuff. I wanted to learn everything I possibly could. And so I wound up double majoring in archaeology and ceramics. I was doing field schools to fulfill archaeology degree requirements. So we would be in Pompeii for about 2 months every summer, and it was awesome. It wasn't until I kind of abandoned the pursuit of academic archaeology as my full-time day-to-day thing, when I sort of shifted into like teaching ceramics full-time, that I found myself having weirdly a lot more freedom and a lot more opportunity and a lot more fun in participating with archaeological research, because I was freed from what that looks like as a researcher. When you're doing research as like a ceramic artist, it's different than the structure you would follow as an academic archaeologist. A lot of my work does definitely have an archaeological reference to like ancient forms or ancient surface technique, but then also its existence as like a ceramic object. I am turning a lot of these very historically rooted pots into these kind of volcanic landscapes. It's a very, very beautiful addition to any pot, but it's also a reference to change and destruction and how nothing, not even a landscape, stays the same over time. One reason that I was interested in doing this residency was obviously just the time to focus on a project-specific thing. I love going down a research rabbit hole. I love it. On the practical level, I love the challenge of taking a material and just getting to know it. How it reacts when I work the material, how it reacts when I fire it 5 different ways. One thing that is awesome about Greenwich House Pottery is our access to completely manual reduction kilns. There is still such a physicality to that process and such an awareness of the color of the flame, the timing of everything. It feels like one of the closer experiences you can have to kind of touching experiences of the past. I had a very specific project that I wanted to do as a resident that really had a connection to Greenwich House. Greenwich House has been open for over 120 years. And during that time, we've had a lot of amazing artists pass through here and really well-known academics as well. One of those people being Gisela Richter, who was the first female curator at the Met. She was installed in that position in the 1920s. At the time, she was considered an expert in Etruscan pottery, and she published tons and tons of books over her career. But one of her earlier publications was a book that she published with the help of Maud Robinson, who was the first director of the pottery here. And this was a book about how ancient Athenian pottery would have been made. She just kind of goes through the process of processing clay and then throwing in sections and putting pieces together, and then how the firing process works. She used the studios at Alfred University and also the studios of Greenwich House Pottery. And a lot of my project is going back through this book and just seeing how that information holds up through 100 more years of the pottery and also 100 more years of archaeological research. When she published that book, that would have been considered kind of a new branch of archaeology. something that today we would call experimental archaeology, where you recreate the conditions of the past to try to glean some new insight about artifacts or craft production. I'm looking at her book and a few other books that were published building off of that to see how that information comports with stuff that I've dug up, stuff that I've seen in museums. I've also been experimenting with the way that we actually view ancient pots. In a lot of archaeological publications, there's a really specific way that ancient pottery is illustrated, a pottery profile illustration. It's almost like a cross-section of a pot. As a potter, it's immensely satisfying to just flip through a book and see like all the little pottery profiles. As an archaeologist, I've done a lot of that kind of illustration, and it's just so funny the way that you take a little busted potsherd and do this specific technical drawing and transfer it back into a rendering of its kind of full self. And so I've been kind of trying to reverse that process a little bit and make these traditional forms with a quarter of them chopped away. From like a very specific view, you can see the outside and the inside. Kind of like pottery that informs archaeological illustration that then informs its own kind of pottery. Even though a lot of my work will kind of reference stuff that I'm directly interested in, I want to be like a little bit lost in the process. And I think that's just a reference to all of the pottery that I've excavated over the years, where I've had this experience. You pull this incredible potsherd out of the ground and you can sort of artistically reconstruct it. And it's this like gorgeous, perfect little object that you can see must have been made with an enormous degree of skill and care. And you have no idea who the pot maker would have been, right? Even if you know on an academic level, you don't actually know, they're totally removed from it. And so in archaeology, there's this concept that pots aren't people. You can't excavate a bunch of pots and take that as a one-to-one. But as a potter, I do feel like pots kind of are people. They are physical artifacts of whoever made them.